This is the Anbernic RG40XXV. It's a great vertical handheld with a not so great name. If you have retro handhelds yourself, or maybe you've looked into them, then you probably have heard of Anbernic. Anbernic is one of the many companies out there that are currently working on retro handhelds, and Anbernic is well known for being the company that mass produces new handhelds with different form factors at a rapid pace. In fact, they work so quickly that in between the time I ordered this one, Anbernic already released 2 new models. Now there's the RG40XXV, which is a vertical handheld but with 2 analog sticks, whoa, and the RG40XX, which has 2 analog sticks as well, but this time it has a horizontal form factor. And as someone who's fairly new to the handheld world, you know, I have like a couple of Retroid devices and my Steam Deck, which is still my go-to a lot of the time. I have heard a lot about Anbernic, but I've never bought one of their handhelds until now. So I was questioning if I really wanted to purchase one of these, knowing that there's probably tens or hundreds of others that look and feel and work the exact same way as this. But you know what? I wanted to give it a shot because I have never gotten a vertical variant of one of these retro handhelds before. I have mostly stuck with retro handhelds that have the horizontal form factors and not so much something that is a straight up Game Boy lookalike. And so I was really interested in this one because it's only $65. At that price point, especially for the games and the features and all the customization that this has to offer, that's a really good deal. So in this video, I just want to lay out my thoughts and impressions about this device. Is it worth it? Is it still a good budget option? Or is there another way to enjoy these classic games without the purchase of another retro handheld? So I've had this device for about a week now, and for a budget system, this is a really beautiful device to just look at and display, especially the white variant here. This has a nice 4-inch IPS display with very thin bezels and a screen that is plenty bright and vivid enough for anything you play on it. Colors are vivid, sprites are really sharp, and of course you can adjust this with filters and RetroArch or whatnot. It's everything you'd want in a screen, and this is the perfect size in my opinion. As for the buttons themselves, the D-pad and face buttons are really nice and comfortable. They're not as clicky as something like a 3DS, for example, and they feel similar to, say, the buttons on the Steam Deck. They have a nice amount of resistance to them. You have to push them down a little bit more, but it has this really nice tactile feedback. Since this device can run 3D games as well, there's 4 shoulder buttons on the back instead of 2. I was resting my fingers on top of these buttons, and the issue here is that since these buttons don't have much resistance, if you're like deep in a gaming session, they are really easy to accidentally click. Depending on how you have your bindings set, this might mess up whatever you're playing. So sometimes I did have to train myself to move my fingers under the shoulder buttons, but of course sometimes you need those buttons, so it just depends on the game. But I definitely did have a few moments where I pushed these buttons down without meaning to. It just doesn't take much force. And of course you have your other common buttons here, start and select, your volume buttons, power. But the obvious focal point on this is the control stick. It sticks out like a sore thumb, and there's definitely more to be desired from this stick. Obviously it's here because you can play 3D games on this guy, but there's one huge flaw. I don't know if this was an oversight or how they missed this, but the analog stick, when you move it around, is mapped like a D-pad, meaning there's no full 360-degree movement. It's mapped to the 8 cardinal directions that you would get on a D-pad. And that doesn't sound like the biggest deal, but when you're playing games like Sonic Adventure, for example, this is a game that usually has that 360-degree movement, and you absolutely need that when you're rolling around at the speed of sound, and you have all of these different obstacles you have to avoid. This system just doesn't make it easy to do it, because if you need to nudge Sonic to the right a little bit, there's a chance it could go too far right, and then you're just like halting all of your momentum or hitting some type of obstacle. I have no idea why Anbernic released an analog stick that basically just works like a D-pad, but they did. Maybe there was no quality control. Maybe they just didn't have time to look at this because they're too busy releasing 7 other handhelds right now. I don't know. However, leave it to the fans to try and make solutions themselves. Depending on certain OSs that you can download onto this guy, there are certain analog stick fixes. Because I downloaded Knulli OS, it is still in development and there's currently no built-in analog fix I can download for it right now. But on other OSs like MuOS, there is a built-in analog fix. I'm just gonna wait it out. I feel like with enough research or enough time waiting, there will be some type of solution to this issue for me. But it's still very annoying that we have to rely on the community to fix very glaring issues that should just not be there in the first place. The analog stick aside though, the rest of these controls here are solid. They're pretty much exactly what you would expect. And minus the shoulder buttons on the back not having enough resistance, the rest of these controls feel very solid and exactly what you would want on a handheld. When you boot this up for the first time, you're greeted with Anbernic's stock OS, which is, it's an OS. It's loaded on this micro SD card, which is 64 gigabytes, and comes pre-installed with Anbernic's stock OS and thousands of games pre-installed already, which I'm also unsure how Anbernic can get away with providing you all of these ROMs, by the way, because like, piracy. Granted, I hear that maybe they're not the best playable ROMs and they don't always have the best performance, but if you are looking for a gaming solution out of the box with plenty to play, gee man, Anbernic does not care. They will give you a lot of games regardless of where they may have acquired them. There's also a simple settings menu here used to tweak different kinds of generic settings, you know, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, different input methods, different home screen layouts. But the most unique setting you can adjust here is the LED indicator around the analog stick, which is a neat little feature, and you can adjust different animations on it and have certain colors change when you move the stick around, or have, you know, your generic RGB gamified galore. There's also ways to customize the home menu, but they're very limited. You have from one of two choices here, one of them being this column look with these full pictures that take up the whole screen, and then the other one being a standard icon look where you just scroll left to right. These just feel cheap in my opinion. If you've seen any retro handheld videos, you've seen that there's much better custom OSs you can get running on this guy that actually look nice. For example, Knulli OS is leaps better than the stock OS, and it gives you so much more customization with the main menu. There's fully animated menus, an easy to access theme downloader where you can download custom made themes, access to services like Screen Scraper, which is a website that can connect to your device to download a whole bunch of metadata like box art and different descriptions for all of your ROMs, and retro achievements, which are exactly as they sound. They are literally community-made achievements for thousands of your retro games. So I chose Knulli OS because, man, these menus are just incredible, and I just think it looks so much better with the regular Knulli theme applied. If you're looking at other OSs, Mu OS is also a really good contender, but I just chose Knulli because of the vibes, man. Look how good this looks. It's so sleek, simple, and then you can open up each menu and it just displays a nice long list of every single game you own with the box art, description. Clean and minimal, it's all I need. You can stick with this theme or hundreds of others. There's so many different themes to choose from. There's some based on the PSP's menu, menus where the different systems are on a radial wheel, Nintendo Switch inspired themes, themes that display your art in full screen, and one really cool one called Animatics that features a lot of iconic settings and characters based on that console. Knulli is still in development. It's missing some features like a fix for the analog stick that you can find on other OSs like Mu OS, and it does have a couple of little issues in there that you have to look past. But if you're looking for a solid OS that gives you a whole lot of different customization for the themes and for how you want this device to be presented, I would take a look at Knulli if you're interested. I'll leave a link in the description for the setup guide. Okay, but I've talked too much about like the themes and the visuals and whatnot. Hey, did you know you can play games on this thing? Fun fact. Right off the bat, any 2D games on this will work like a dream. NES, SNES, Genesis, all of it will work great. There's no problems here, and because of the IPS screen, the colors here look real vivid, the quality's sharp, and everything looks exactly as you would expect. All of these ROMs run on RetroArch, and because Knulli already has RetroArch set up for you, there's already a whole slew of shortcuts that let you easily make save states, load states, fast forward, and even adjust different filters on the fly, which is a really nice touch. And with the inclusion of built-in retro achievements, I feel more of an incentive to actually go back and replay many of these classic games. I know there's going to be a ton of purists that hear this out here and they're like, why would you want to tarnish these gaming experiences with like a bunch of achievement unlocked little notifications? But like, look, when I get the achievement popping up in the corner, the dopamine hit, is nice, okay? I am a simple individual. When you give me an achievement for collecting 100 coins, the brain chemicals get satisfied. If you're in the mood for Nintendo DS gaming, this is surprisingly a good pick for that too. Many of the games I enjoyed playing back in the day work well here. Games like New Super Mario Bros., Kirby Superstar Ultra, and Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. And as long as the game doesn't rely on viewing both screens at the same time, like anything, for example, where the action is happening on the top screen and there's a map or your inventory on the bottom, works well for this. The Analogue Stick here is used as a simulator for the DS stylus, and pressing the shoulder button on the back will simulate tapping the screen. This is a functional way to play DS games, as long as you're not like drawing anything, because otherwise I think you'd have more success in Microsoft Paint. But for any platformers, for anything that mostly relies on the buttons and not touchscreen control, it's going to work great for those games. And because of the form factor of this handheld, this is perfect for Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. For me, this handheld gives me an excuse to dive into the wide library of Game Boy Color games because I've never really experienced many of them. These were just before my time. And maybe I'm just more excited to dive into those games because of the form factor of this device. I mean, it's modeled directly after a Game Boy Color, just more modernized, right? And like I said, with all those additional add-ons like having your retro art shortcuts, different shaders and filters, and retro achievements, this is definitely a really fun way to discover or rediscover these classics. Game Boy Advance games are also great on this, of course. Not surprisingly, they all work like a charm, and there's really nothing new to say here. One cool selection of games I really want to touch on real quick are the Portmaster games. Portmaster is the software that you can download directly onto your handheld, and it allows you to search and access from hundreds of different PC games that can be downloaded directly from the internet. Some of these might be games that you've just never heard of that you can try out for free, and some of these are pretty familiar games directly from Steam. Games like Stardew Valley, Balatro, UFO 50, and even Half-Life. These games, however, since you have to pay for them on Steam and other storefronts, Portmaster is obviously not just going to let you download these games for free. If you want to play games like that on here, you do have to provide the game files from Steam yourself, just to prove that you're not like a filthy swashbuckling pirate, you know? But the free games here are awesome too, and it's just a fun inclusion to get more out of your device. Last, let's talk about the 3D gaming, and this is when it really starts to vary. Performance isn't the real issue for me here, although I did have some performance issues with games like Banjo-Kazooie, which just straight up played like a PowerPoint presentation.
There's that classic Banjo catchphrase.
But I did some research to check other people's performance, and honestly, in most of these games, it works just fine. So I think there's just something wrong with the way I set up my games. So this is all on me. From what I've seen, this can competently run in 64. Performance aside though, the main issue here is just dealing with that analog stick. Because like I said before, since you're not getting that true analog control and you're dealing with an analog stick that's only giving you cardinal directions, that means 8 different directional inputs like a D-pad, it does hinder how you're going to be able to play certain games. So for 3D gaming, your mileage will vary. So that is the Anbernic what's this thing called again? RG40XXV. It's a fantastic device for those who may be new to the retro handheld scene and want a really cheap entry point in a vertical form factor. And despite what I've said about the analog stick and the shoulder buttons and just the minor quirks here and there, for the price, you're still getting a lot of really good value here. The screen is fantastic, the D-pad and face buttons are amazing. You can store this device with up to a 512 gigabyte SD card if you want, and just absolutely load it up with all of the classics. Yes, it has its flaws, but most of them can be patched with the community's efforts, and with enough tweaking and changes, you can get this device set up exactly how you want it. Let me know what you guys think about this device or any handhelds that Anbernic has released. Do you have one of these? Do you have anything that Anbernic has released, or are you just happy with your Steam Deck? Let me know what you think. I hope you've enjoyed the variety of different gaming hardware content I've been making on this channel. If you have any cool ideas, let me know, man. I'm doing this for the thrills. The Mr. Beast, here we come, baby. Just this many more subscribers until we catch up to the man himself. I know we can do it. All right, guys, I appreciate you. Thanks for Thanks for watching.